Reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 14 through 20. After John's arrest, Jesus appeared in Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God. This is the time of fulfillment. The reign of God is at hand. Change your hearts and minds and believe this good news. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw the brothers, Simon and Andrew, casting their nets into the sea, since they fished by trade. Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of humankind." They immediately abandoned their nets and followed Jesus. Proceeding a little further along, Jesus saw the brothers, James and John Bar-Zebedee. They too were in their boat, putting their nets in order. Immediately, Jesus called them, and they left their father Zebedee, standing in the boat with the hired help, and they went off in the company of Jesus.
We sat in a coffee shop just off of campus. And the student looked at me directly in the eye, said, "I am not going to seminary, and I am not going to ever work in the church." He had started college at the age of 16. Super smart. At the age of almost 21, he began his first semester at Chicago Theological Seminary. I remember telling him during coffee, let's just wait and see what God might do. After seminary, he went to Connecticut and served as the senior minister of one of the more prominent churches in Connecticut, next to the University of Connecticut at UConn. From there, he and his husband moved to Canada, where his husband became a canon at the Episcopal or Anglican Cathedral, and Matt went on to become a pastor with the United Church of Christ Standing, serving in the United Church of Canada. Matt is the one who wrote the gathering prayer today. When I first saw that Matt had written this prayer in Gathering magazine from the United Church of Canada, and then realized he was writing the week-by-week section, which I've done before for the United Church of Canada, to help pastors think about what that Sunday might look like, Matt was also, or is, the author for the month of January. Never, ever say never. The call of God comes upon all of us. It's not just for me who's ordained or those ordained among us. God is calling you too. Now, you may be a bit more resistant than some clergy, but I was quite resistant myself. I never said I was not going to do it, not go to seminary, but I decided that my way around being a minister was to enroll at Duke as a Master of Theological Studies student and then continue and do my PhD, and I would teach ministers instead of be one. But within the first 4 weeks of being an MTS student, we had gathered at the Associate Dean's home since the MTS cohort was small, and I realized, as perhaps I've told you before, they were the most boring group of folks I've ever had dinner with. Now, I like intellectual conversation, but dwelling on such significant points was like, if this is what it's going to be. But still, I could feel God calling. Now, honestly, I had felt God calling within my life for quite a while. Now, I'm not one of those that have a magnificent call story, that a light from heaven, or it comes overnight, but I had grown up in the church and had always felt God's call. Even in college, as an undergraduate, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a youth minister. But when I applied to Duke, one of my professors wrote a recommendation, and who was my advisor actually in mass communications, said, I wholeheartedly recommend Kelly, because he brought the recommendation laid in front of me to proof, as I was the editor of the university newspaper, said, is this good enough? And I'm like, whatever you write. He said, no, please read it. And he said something like this: even though I'm thrilled to recommend Kelly to Duke University Divinity School, I am quite saddened that we lose another prized future journalist. Shortly after the conversation with my MTS cohorts, I decided I would change my standing and be a Master of Divinity School student. And had 3 successful years, but the crisis came as is getting close to graduation. And in one of our practical courses called Church's Ministry, we sort of had to reflect upon our time at Duke, but also talk about what the future looked like. I was bold enough for my outside reader, for my thesis, to say, I am not going to serve in the church. He was one of 3 that I had said that to. I told my college pastor, and I also had said that in one of my internship cohorts. And each time I had said that, they all said, go ahead, do whatever you like, but we will see what God will do. All 3 said that almost verbatim. A year after seminary, I accepted my first call to serve as a pastor in Chicago. I think sometimes when we feel God's call upon our lives, that's for all of us, that we think about God's call as a whole long list of shoulds. You should think like this, you should be like this. And then when we get into the churches, when we are called by congregations, often there's still a list of shoulds. The list of shoulds, I believe, sometimes we should let go of, because God calls us all just as we are. As Matt wrote in one of his reflections in Gathering Magazine for this Sunday, he said, often we psychoanalyze the disciples who Jesus calls and wonder about what was in their heart and minds to just give up everything they had done and walk away from their fathers. We talk about it like there's some defect in their lives, that how would they dare do something so crazy? But the thing is, it is God's call, that spirit within us, that compels us to do what we do. It may be because we are a teacher. It may be that we are involved in banking industry because we believe that there can be something more than just the money itself. It may be just because God needs you. Honestly, God needs all of us and wants us to hear that call. Perhaps the story of the disciples answering that call is not about that there's weird and for folks, but it's that the love of God permeates, that the love of God circulates within our lives, calling, saying, give up the nets. Give up the nets that may have controlled you, that you may have even found yourself emotionally entangled in. It is God calling. to embrace something new. Now, I've been asked if the call changes with time. First of all, I believe that God's call is constant, that God's love and our call to go out and share that love remains. But how we understand our calls is also part of the seasons of life. That the ideal of being just a youth minister in college was not just for them, but as the call expands, you learn new things. There are regrets where you hear God's call, but you want to so much follow the list of shoulds that you defend God, put God in a box, and hold it too tight. I did that in my first call. A young man had just returned from Ethiopia, and I've mentioned this before to some of you, and he was trying to figure out Jesus. And we had coffee, and he said to me, "Can we just talk about Jesus a little less?" I sat up straight, and I said, "Jesus is the heart of the Christian church, and if we give up Jesus, we give up everything else." He left the church. Perhaps the call of Jesus then was not so much about protecting Jesus, but was opening it, that Jesus could move in new ways. For I firmly believe now that his experience in Ethiopia changed his life. He had engaged through the Peace Corps a calling. And so sometimes in that box of shoulds, we shut others out. So probably within this year, you will call a minister here. Now, I know you have been in conversations and be in conversation today and some more, that we all have a list of dreams. But there's also the question is, what is God calling you to be? What is God calling you to be without he, she, or them saying, this is the way we're going? But perhaps that call is saying, this is who we are. This is our dreams. Can you join us in the journey? We are called to be on a journey together. Amen.